because I've always argued the environment should not be a political or partisan issue. It is a people issue, a global issue. It is our life and our children's lives and our grandchildren. So that's what we're doing.
On the shores of Lake Champlain, hundreds of friends and supporters of Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy gathered at the Coach Barn at Shelburne Farms to honor the senator for his unyielding support of Vermont's environment and communities during his long tenure in public service. Vermont's environmental community gathered to say thank you to the senator and are happy to share the event with you through this video.
What a wonderful turnout. Thanks, everybody. I'm Brian Shupe. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Natural Resources Council, and it is a tremendous honor tonight to be able to welcome you all to this celebration for a true Vermont hero, the senior senator from Vermont, Patrick Leahy. So, and no introduction of Senator Leahy is complete without also recognizing the person who has literally been at his side for all of his years in the Senate and who still inspires Vermonters, Marcel Leahy. So today's celebration is a group effort. It's an opportunity for several of the organizations that have spent years working to protect and conserve Vermont's natural resources. It's farm and forest land, it's lakes and rivers, the rural economy, the vitality of our communities, and the health of Vermonters, to give a collective thank you to Senator Leahy for all of his work over the last 48 years. I want to go through and say a few words about the various sponsors, the other organizations who joined together to make this event happen. And first, I want to start with Shelburne Farms, who not only is co-sponsoring the event, but is such a generous host. Shelburne Farms is an education nonprofit on a mission to inspire and cultivate learning for a sustainable future. Megan Camp and Alec Webb are here, also Kate Webb, and they deserve a lot of appreciation, not only for Vermont, for all they've done. I think I can just leave it at that. It's all they've done, but also all they've done to make this amazing property available and share it with the public over the years. And I really want to thank their team, Tree McCarty, Robin Tuneau, and Betsy Rosenthal, who really pulled things together tonight. So officially, Shelburne Farms is the Shelburne Farms Institute for Sustainable Schools. And the 1,400-acre diversified farm is located on the historic homelands of the Winooskik Band of the Abenaki people. And before I go on and talk about the other organizations who helped pull tonight's event together, I want to turn it over to Shelburne Farms staff person, Delante Keys, who has generously offered to give a land acknowledgement.
Thank you to the glacial till, to the silt, to the clay, to the gravel and the sediment. Admiration for the grooves carved by Ozioso that embellish that majestic horizon. Gratitude to the standing ones outstretched against the blue expanse. Oak, pine, and life-giving eastern white cedar among you. What exquisite reminders you are that there is grace in being in and of the moment. A chorus of indebtedness for Patanbach, the waters that lie between. How many lifetimes have you spent lapping like an ancient metronome? it is all of you and the innumerable others and each of us that attribute to Aki, the soil, our invaluable teacher and miraculous home, offering both congregation and communion, inspiring us to reach for hope in dark hours and cling to resiliency. Just as you did when your original family was snatched from your embrace, the Wanuskik Band of the Abenaki have been in reciprocal relationship with this place for thousands of years. Trusted keepers of your long history, disciples and practitioners of your wisdom, this lineage was interrupted, this family uprooted. The forced assimilation, displacement, sterilization, genocide, and countless other crimes of colonization have yet to be rectified. Yet the land teaches us that there can be growth beyond trauma, bounty after suffering. This begins with acknowledgement, with humility, with reverence. The land is alive as we are alive. Its legacy begets each of our individual accomplishments. We are fortunate to know this special place. Alongside the contemporary Abenaki, for this is still Nadakina, home. So I invite us all to imagine how we can continue the sacred work of caring for our communities while answering the call of the land and honoring those who first knew these places. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Delante. So I do want to just say a couple of thoughts about some of the other groups who are here tonight. I encourage everyone to visit their tables. There's a lot of staff from different organizations here sharing the good work that they're doing around the state. The Trust for Public Land is here. Shelby Sims and Kate Weiner, who run their the Montpelier office, are here. TPL creates parks and projects and protects land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. They protected over 66,000 acres in Vermont across 90 projects and are currently working on 9 additional conservation projects as part of their mission to connect everyone to the outdoors with core commitments to climate, health, equity, and community. A second sponsor for tonight's event is the Nature Conservancy. TNC's director, Heather Furman's not able to be here tonight. She had a long-planned elk hunting trip out in Wyoming. I'm actually thinking that maybe she brought a quart of maple syrup and dropped it off at Lynn Cheney's house. So TNC is a global conservation organization dedicated to conserving the lands and waters in which all life depends, while connecting people and nature. In Vermont, TNC has helped conserve over 300,000 acres of land, 2,000 miles of shoreline, and owns and manages a network of 56 natural areas that encompass 32,000 acres. Vermont Land Trust, another organization who sponsored tonight's event. Nick Richardson and several folks of the VLT team are here. Rooted in Vermont since 1977, the Vermont Land Trust helps protect, care for, and connect to the home that we share. Helps people protect, care for, and connect to the home that we share. I told Nick before this that he was the most concise of all despite the huge accomplishments of Vermont Land Trust, an organization of few words. Lake Champlain Committee's here, Lori Fisher and her team, a couple members of her board. LCC is a watershed-based, bi-state nonprofit working to protect and restore water quality, safeguard habitat, monitor lake health, provide access, and foster stewardship through science-based advocacy, education, and collaborative action. Audubon Vermont's here. I'm not sure if David Mears showed up. I know he was on a fast track from Concord, Mass. today. A couple of his other staff folks are here. Audubon works to protect birds in the places birds and people need to thrive through a combination of advocacy, on-the-ground conservation, and public outreach and engagement. They also operate the Green Mountain Audubon Center, a 255-acre important bird area and education facility in Huntington. The Vermont Youth Conservation Corps is another sponsor. Breck Knopf is here, their director. VYCC enrolls hundreds of young adults to work on conservation and agriculture projects, primarily in remote backcountry settings, as well as in towns and villages throughout Vermont. VYCC's mission is to take action and build community by working and learning together on the land. Conservation Law Foundation's here. Elena Mahali's the Vermont director. A couple of their other staff are here. CLF is a New England-wide nonprofit fighting to protect our environment for the benefit of people and our future generations. CLF uses the law, science, the market, and communications to create solutions that preserve and restore our natural resources, build healthy, resilient, and just communities, and sustain a vibrant economy. National Wildlife Federation is here. Curtis Fisher runs the Northeastern office in Montpelier. And NWF is America's largest conservation organization, and together with their state affiliate, the Vermont Natural Resources Council, they work on a wide range of state, regional, and federal conservation priorities. And then finally, our 11th sponsor, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, Gus Seelig and several VHCB staff are here. VHCB invests in state and federal funds through housing and conservation nonprofits, community organizations, and other partners to close critical gaps in financing of affordable housing projects and help to enhance and maintain an ecologically connected and functioning natural and working landscape. So really want to express my appreciation for all of these organizations, not only for co-sponsoring tonight's event, but for really the many contributions that they've made to the Vermont over the years and all of the collaborations and partnerships that we've had together. Together, we've made a really big difference in the state, and I feel like a lot of our accomplishments were made possible by Senator Leahy. And in that regard, I think we're all own a piece of this Leahy conservation and environmental legacy, and that makes us very proud and very thankful for the Senator. I also want to note that we are only a few of the organizations whose work has benefited from Senator Leahy's time in office. There are many other groups who could be on the list who would also share their appreciation for his work. Paul Burns from Vermont, from VPIRG, is here tonight. Had he and I not gotten into a miscommunication over his 50th anniversary in this event, they'd be on the list. Our friends at Preservation Trust of Vermont, an important partner of ours, are having an event this Saturday to thank Senator Leahy for all he's done for the state's downtowns and village centers. ECHO is also having an event on the lake. So I think it's safe to say that tonight we're speaking for a lot more people than just our memberships and our staff and our boards. We're talking on behalf of people across the state of Vermont. And just one other final thanks I want to make, and an important one, is I want to thank several individuals who supported tonight's event, and they're recognized in the program, and I encourage you to take a look at the program to see who has helped out make this event possible. These are people who not only help make tonight possible, but they contribute to all of our organizations in many ways, and in fact make our work possible on a year-round basis. So I really want to thank our donors who helped make this happen. So when we first got together to talk about how do we commemorate and summarize Senator Leahy's conservation and environmental accomplishments over 48 years, we realized that boiling that down to a couple of brief speeches is really, really a challenge. We had talked about some options, maybe getting Ken Burns to do a 6-part, 12-hour documentary on the Leahy legacy, but that didn't come together for a couple of reasons. But instead, we decided we would ask 3 people from outside of our organizations who have a unique perspective, both about Senator Leahy's work, have tracked it over the years, are aware of his contributions to the state and to the nation, but also who are familiar with our organizations, who understand our work and what we do at the community level. So I'm not going to, in order to be efficient with our time, I'm going to introduce all 3 of them in the order in which they're going to appear, and then just turn it over to them. And my introductions will be brief. We're going to start with Candace Page, a longtime journalist and editor who's covered a wide range of environmental issues in Vermont and has covered Senator Leahy's time in office since his first days in office. Gaye Symington, the former Speaker of the Vermont House of Representatives, and in that role and through her role working with the Intervale Foundation and as president of the High Meadows Foundation, has had the opportunity to work directly with, I think, all of our organizations and the partners and communities that we work with, and has a particular perspective on our work and how it relates to Senator Leahy's contributions. And then finally, we're going to ask Maggie Gendron, who grew up in central Vermont and worked for Senator Leahy, first in Vermont and then in Washington, D.C., and recently returned to Vermont to serve as the Deputy Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources. So with that, I'm going to ask Candy Page to come up to the stage.
You know, we're here today to celebrate Pat Leahy's 48 years of environmental and conservation work in Washington. And as I look out at the audience, it's clear that some of you weren't even alive 48 years ago. So as one of the dwindling number of people who was there, I've been asked to tell you a little bit about how it all began. So one Monday in 1970, a Chittenden County prosecutor who was just 30 years old, a kid really, spoke to a group of middle-aged Burlington businessmen as they sat comfortably digesting their lunch. He did not have comfortable words for them. So this is a quote. "For those of us who have traveled outside the state and seen the ravages of pollution in the Hudson River, Lake Erie, and other places, we realized how fragile Vermont's environment really is," he said. "Certainly anybody robbing our children of their financial heritage would be branded a criminal. By the same token, those who rob our children of their environmental heritage should also be branded as criminals." So I think you love that quotation as much as I do. It sounds like a young person. It's brash, maybe a little naive, and it doesn't duck from that tough word, criminal, and its implication that the law is coming for business people, maybe even like those in the room. So for those of you who weren't born in 1970, I can tell you that young Patrick J. Leahy was also expressing the outrage that many people, especially young people, felt about the state of the world back then and what our leaders had done or allowed to happen. 58,000 American deaths in Vietnam, 8% inflation that made us scared about the future, and a president so deceitful he was about to be impeached. But in addition to that, urban smog so thick it was killing people, rivers so polluted they caught on fire, pesticide use that put entire species at risk. A few months before Pat voiced his outrage to the Burlington Lions Club, thousands of others had marched in the streets to celebrate a brand new cause, Earth Day, and to call for tougher laws to protect our air, our land, our water. The early 70s marked perhaps the height of the environmental movement, the years when public pressure led to the passage of the National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and in Vermont, Act 250. I also love this quotation because it was the earliest evidence I could find of Pat Leahy's deep-seated commitment to what he called our environmental heritage. When I got to know Pat in 1973, he was not a guy identified with environmental causes. No, he was the crime-fighting Chittenden County prosecutor familiar to every Vermonter north of Route 4 from his many appearances on the nightly news. He knew how to make friends of reporters in those days. Vermonters knew Pat as the guy who prosecuted murderers, fought drug crime, and who made the national news with his memo to Vermont police departments on the knotty problem of what to do about skinny dipping hippies who were offending the tender sensibilities of some Vermonters. He told them to find a better way to spend their time. The environment was barely mentioned when Pat announced that he would run for the U.S. Senate in 1974. That was a brash, risky move, since the incumbent was George Aiken, a Vermont icon on par with Camel's Hump, maple syrup, you name it. Besides, Pat was still a kid in many eyes, though the receding hairline really helped add an air of maturity. Even then, Pat was also a Catholic and a Democrat at a time when Vermonters were assumed to be suspicious of all those qualities, and Vermonters had never sent someone meeting that description to Washington. Even after Aiken decided not to run again, Pat trailed his Republican opponent in the polls all the way to Election Day. But what the pundits and pollsters missed, and what Pat Leahy understood, was that Vermont had changed, was changing, with an influx of urban refugees and the coming of age of the baby boom. Protests in the streets were moving to the ballot box. Pat's election marked another step in the evolution of Vermont from a rock-ribbed Republican bastion to a state that would embrace Bernie Sanders. And finally, that quote from 1970 helps explain to me, anyway, how a guy who first campaigned on a platform of fighting inflation and political disillusionment ended up as an extraordinary champion of the values and causes dear to all the people in this room. Like Pat Leahy, I grew up in Vermont in the 1940s and 50s, at a time when our landscape was composed of more than 6,000 family farms. When the water of Lake Champlain was so crystal clear you could see every ridge in the sand 3 feet below the surface. When people, including small boys, took for granted clean air and water. When they took for granted their access to local woods, the nearby swimming hole, their favorite tree stand in deer season. You could not grow up in Vermont then without a conscious or unconscious connection to the working landscape and the natural world, no matter whether you grew up on a 20-cow farm or in a home attached to the family printing plant in downtown Montpelier. That was the environmental heritage Pat was defending when he called out polluters in 1970. That was the environmental heritage that a growing number of Vermont voters were thinking of at the ballot box. Senator Leahy had not yet been sworn in January 1975, when one of his first acts, and possibly his first act, was to press the Interior Department to assess the effects on Lake Champlain of a proposed flood control dam on the Richelieu River. The people here this afternoon know about the 48 years of work that followed. You know, I'm sure, about the millions of dollars dedicated to a cleaner Lake Champlain, about the protection of the Conte Wildlife Refuge, the Green River Reservoir, and thousands more acres. Others will be talking more about that. So I'd like to end by calling out some of the efforts we know less about. Pat's work, which began with a commitment to Vermont, now reaches around the globe in ways big and small. He has helped protect not just our natural heritage, but that of people we will never meet. We have Senator Leahy and his many years on the Appropriations Committee and the Foreign Ops Subcommittee, and his chairmanship of the Agriculture Committee for a time. We have that to thank for protected forests in Wyoming, Hawaii, Georgia, and dozens of other states. We have his leadership to thank for providing money to protect ecosystems in Indonesia, Guatemala, and the Congo Basin. We have Senator Leahy to thank not just for programs that keep Vermont's working landscape working, but for funds to protect endangered great apes in Africa and biodiversity in Colombia. We have Senator Leahy to thank not just for dollars to help Lake Champlain, but for $500 million a year appropriated at his insistence and over the objection of Republicans for the Green Climate Fund to help carry out the provisions of the Paris Climate Agreement. As a young woman, I knew Pat first as a personal friend who believed in the same things I did. Then he became a national politician, and I became a reporter and editorial writer. When we encountered each other, it was with some degree of wariness and skepticism. There might even have been some moments of antagonism. But today, I'm here, as I think you are, to offer my deepest thanks to the Senator, not just on behalf of the state I love, but on behalf of the planet. Thanks.
Switch my glasses here. Good evening. When I asked friends and colleagues for their thoughts about Senator Leahy's environmental legacy, I heard 5 themes: a love of people and places, relationships and trust, respect for science, using a variety of tools over a long career, and respect for the rule of law. People and places. Some of us make our livelihoods on farms and in forests, but most of us visit these places as refuge from the human-driven systems around us and as a source of perspective, inspiration, and wonder for the critters, plants, and fungi who call out in song, communicate through scent, vibration, and underground mystery, and travel long distances away from and back to our neighborhoods, depending on the season. To list the many significant places that have been protected because of funding or legislation initiated by Senator Leahy would take longer than even you have the stamina to listen to. We've created banners with samplings of those places and the programs or legislation that enabled and support them. I will highlight just 2, the Lake Champlain Basin Program and the Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller National Park. The Lake Champlain Basin Program coordinates and funds efforts to benefit water quality, wetlands, fisheries, recreation, and cultural resources in the basin. Since 1992, it has awarded more than $8 million in 1,300 local grants and funded more than 80 research and demonstration projects. These grants set in motion the hard work of protecting the lake and public access to it. Canoe access sites, trail improvements, stream bank stabilization, helping farmers dispose of old pesticides, training and coordinating volunteers to monitor cyanobacteria, scientific and engineering studies of the effectiveness in soil and sediment runoff strategies, to name just a few. Senator Leahy authored legislation signed in 1992 establishing the Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller National Historic Park. The park is home to the Conservation Institute. The Institute hosts research and training that benefits National Park Service leaders throughout the country, including guidance on making national parks more welcoming to diverse visitors. Now retired John Elder described the park at its opening as a new kind of park, one where the human stories and the natural history are intertwined. Each one of the places and pieces of legislation highlighted around us in these banners represents that legacy. They reinforce the intertwining of our human stories and our natural history. Relationships and trust. There is a wide and diverse network of Vermonters, many in this room, committed to, or under this tent, committed to ensuring the protection of clean water, healthy soil, and open and wild spaces. They work in state government, nonprofits, and in businesses. They serve on local planning and conservation commissions and watershed groups. They show up for volunteer events with shovels, work gloves. I saw a hooper around here. They're probably a special kind of work glove. Mud boots, or whatever is called for. They make up what Gus Seelig calls the conspiracy of the willing. Senator Leahy and his team value and fully take advantage of those conspirators. Patrick and Marcel know the people and places of Vermont deeply. His staff are consistently present and connected, whether at meetings, on the phone or Zoom, or in their canoes and in hiking boots. While we all value all of the members of the team, the people I spoke with in the realm of the environment repeatedly talked about their appreciation for Tom Berry, Bob Paquin, Chuck Ross, Adrian Wojciechowski, and Tim Reeser. As experts in their fields, yes. As experts in their fields, yes, but more so trusted to listen and act when needed. Here's a look at that connectivity at work. When Michael Dunn of Derby died, his estate included about 800 acres on the northeastern shore of Lake Memphremagog, half in Canada and half in the United States, in Vermont. The estate made the land available to the respective countries as a park, but only if the governments acted within a fairly short time frame. Gil Livingston, then president of the Vermont Land Trust, described an exploratory meeting in the dead of winter on a cold, windy day with his staff, Derby residents, and Fish and Wildlife staff. And just as they posed for a group photo at the border marker, Border Patrol officers joined them. Canada acted fairly quickly to acquire the land, but things plodded along more slowly on our side of the border. Gil knew the chief of staff for Ken Salazar, then Secretary of the Interior, but had no success moving the process forward through calls and emails. With only days left before the deadline, Gil reached out to Tom Berry. Tom knew that within a day or two, Secretary Salazar would make a presentation to the Senate Appropriations Committee. Gil's last message to Secretary Salazar's staff was a heads up that the first question at his Appropriation Committee hearing presentation would be a request for status update on Eagle Point in Derby, Vermont. Secretary Salazar arrived at the Appropriations Committee with all the necessary documents already signed and handed them to the committee chair. An Eagle Point unit of the Conte National Wildlife Refuge was established in 2009, conserving habitat and public access for hunting, fishing, camping, and other activities. Respect for science. We've all heard Senator Leahy talk about how important it is that his kids and grandkids enjoy this land as he and Marcel have. Senator Leahy understands the principles of conservation science, that we need large tracts of wilderness and carefully managed land protected in perpetuity to maintain biodiversity and allow species to roam among large interconnected blocks of forest, wetland, lakes, and streams buffered by working farms and forests. He relies on Vermont Conservation Design, a visionary document that reflects the latest conservation science. This document was developed by the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, Vermont Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy, and other key partners, including the Conservation Fund, Housing Conservation Board, Trust for Public Land, Vermont Natural Resources Council, Northeast Wilderness Trust, Audubon Vermont, and the Wildlands and Woodlands. The science of water quality is mind-numbingly complex. Water quality research funded through the Lake Champlain Basin Program I mentioned earlier and the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission has played a critical role in informing the work of local, state, and federal agencies in guiding policies and public investments in clean water and flood resilience. In addition, the Lake Champlain pollution reduction strategy and the associated state clean water laws and regulations passed in the last decade all have drawn heavily on research and scientific analysis by the University of Vermont and state and federal scientists. Senator Leahy's legacy commitment to science can be found in the thousands of acres of wilderness added in Vermont because of his leadership, and in the cover crops, culverts, and erosion controls, restored floodplains, and farm and parking lot regulations Vermont now relies on to protect our waterways and soil, as well as our roads and infrastructure. The variety of tools the senator deployed, many of what we consider key environmental tools, originated in farm bills that bore Senator Leahy's imprint. For example, shifting the Farm Bill from a focus on commodity support to support for conservation practices, and creating national organic farming standards, transforming what had been a crunchy granola movement and removing 5 million pounds of pesticides from farm runoff. Senator Leahy's long tenure has allowed him to initially create programs when he led policy committees, and then as chair of appropriations to adequately fund them. One clear example of this is the Forest Legacy Program. When he was chair of the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, Senator Leahy oversaw the creation of the Forest Legacy Program in the 1990 Farm Bill. Since then, the Forest Legacy Program has conserved almost 3 million acres of forest land across all 50 states and the U.S. territories. Through this highly competitive program, more than 105,000 acres have been protected in 22 projects in Vermont, beginning with the first Forest Legacy project in the nation, Cow Mountain Pond in Granby in 1993. $40 million in federal funding has protected forest lands in 11 of our 14 counties, along with $23 million in state and private conservation funding and landowner donations. And finally, respect for the rule of law. Gus Seelig told me, he surprised me actually, that even knowing all these many wild and special places and the research Senator Leahy has enabled, he felt Patrick's greatest legacy is his standing up for the rule of law. Part of that is environmental law. The details of environmental law and due process matter. David Dean, longtime Connecticut River steward, explained to me that time and again, Senator Leahy has protected what's called the 401 State Review section of the 1973 Clean Water Act against substantial attempts to repeal, limit, or otherwise make these provisions ineffective. Why does that matter? Under the 401 certification process, states can amend provisions of federal licenses and other permits to meet state water quality standards. This process has proven especially important during the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's review of the Connecticut River dams under several federal administrations that were unfriendly to environmental priorities. But beyond environmental law, perhaps most important in the realm of law is Senator Leahy's calling out the travesty of our nation's recent Supreme Court judicial nominations, and disregard for basic principles of democracy. For example, when President Obama was denied the presidential duty to appoint a Supreme Court justice, the absence of a peaceful transfer of power in January 2021, and the recent Supreme Court decision to rescind the rights of women to make their reproductive health decisions. What rights and protections will be taken away over the course of the upcoming term that began this month? We need the law and a functioning democratic process if we are to provide our grandchildren the clean water, healthy soil, and special places that frame Senator Leahy's legacy and gifts to Vermont and her citizens. Thank you, Senator Leahy. Thank you for your love of Vermont's people and places, your deep connections to your home state, and the many willing conspirators ready to work with you, your creativity in using a wide variety of tools to serve Vermont, and your respect for and voice for science and the rule of law.
Hi, my name is Maggie, and that is a very hard act to follow. I am here really as a proud alumni of the Leahy family. I worked for Senator Leahy and Marcel Leahy for 11 years. And just to tell you what a family we are, my friends in the Leahy family, when I was coming up to speak, said, "Don't step on Marcel's feet, don't screw up, and don't fall off the stage." So they truly loved me. I'm going to kind of move over a couple of pieces that I had written because I think that Gaye and Candace did a really good job of talking about what the programs are that have really valued and impacted how we are here today as a state of Vermont and the environment. And I'd really like to talk a little bit about Senator Leahy and who he is and how he does it. Well, I'm also one who celebrates experience and wisdom, and I was not born when Senator Leahy took office, and I unabashedly say that. But I don't know what Vermont is without Senator Leahy and Marcel Leahy. And that's a really special place, I think, to grow up in. I, like many other young professionals that Senator Leahy took under his wing, felt like when I grew up in Vermont, I had limited career choices. I am the daughter of hardworking Vermonters. We still run a construction business. We are farmers, we're nurses, we're bakers, and we're teachers. And I don't have an Ivy League academic background, nor did I have any political connections whatsoever. But Senator Leahy gave me an opportunity by hiring me for his staff, first in Vermont and then in Washington, D.C. Like hundreds of Vermonters, Senator Leahy gave us a chance to have an impact in a really substantial way. My path to my work at the Agency of Natural Resources is because Senator Leahy gave me the chance. And this is not a wedding, so I'm not going to cry. Senator Leahy has participated in a world of change. He is a steady presence. He has been a champion of policy, program initiatives, and laws that have only moved us toward a more sustainable planet. He has showed us what progress looks like. Senator Leahy, we are here today. This crowd here signifies that what a deep level of appreciation we have for you and the work and the importance of your efforts in protecting our environment, in conservation and land stewardship, from the protection of animals and plants, forests, and clean water. You have worked so hard to set national and state practices that take care of and find balance in what is an incredibly fragile ecosystem. I really want to thank Brian, Shupe, and all of the partners that provided this planned and host and gave us all an opportunity as a community to give deep appreciation to Senator Leahy and recognize you and Marcel for your efforts. It's just so important that when people spend this much time and energy that we're able to come together and share our thanks. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I've learned watching Senator Leahy work. I've learned that you must be willing to work together. You cannot demonize people that disagree with you, but you must find common ground. That means you have to listen. You have to truly listen, and that often includes that you do not get your own way and you compromise, and that might be because you're taking a small step instead of a huge leap, but you still make progress in that way. And perhaps the lesson that is most meaningful that I've taken away is that you give more credit than you take. So Senator Leahy and Marcel Leahy both showed me through example that leadership is a team sport. And every time I try to give somebody at the Agency of Natural Resources credit, they always go, Maggie, this is a team sport. So I've clearly found my people at the Agency of Natural Resources. They have showed me what patience looks like in practice. I think Marcel might have the most patience of anybody I've ever met on the planet, so thank you for that. She essentially raised hundreds of young 20-year-old Vermonters running around Washington, D.C. and trying to keep us all out of trouble. They have showed us how to build relationships with stakeholders, and most importantly, they have always nurtured their relationships with their family and their friends, and they always put them first. They showed us what it looks like to lead, and you did so with Vermont in your heart, and the compass always led you back to Vermont. So in my tenure with Senator Leahy, these names have been mentioned, but I think they're really important names because these are Leahy staff members who have taken great care in Senator Leahy's legacy in environmental conservation, and that's Tom Berry, Bob Paquin, and Chuck Ross. There's a whole league of dedicated Leahy alumni that have put an incredible amount of time and hours into the work. There's also the partners that are here today. There are so many this is a team sport, so many that have contributed to fighting for authorizing and appropriations legislation and are actually on the ground implementing the work every day. I just wanted to tell a quick story, and I think a woman that I work with, Roz, is here somewhere. But we were at Dead Creek on Saturday to give an award to a recent A&R staff member, Steve Perrin, for his work in protecting endangered and threatened species. And when we were chatting, he was saying to me, at one point, Maggie, our team who is working on restoring the common loon habitat, we looked at each other and we just said, we don't know if we can do this. We might have overpromised here. And then he went on to tell me, he said, that was 20 years ago, and I didn't realize I was going to have gray hair before I saw progress. And that really resonated with me, and I hold that comment close because I think it's people like Senator Leahy and others in this room who spend 20, 30, 40 years moving forward with commitment and energy and weathering the storms of frustration and barriers. So, because of that, Vermont today hosts cleaner water. We have heavily accessed walking trails, biking trails, ski trails, disc golf. We have swimmable ponds and lakes. We have enormous opportunities to enjoy wilderness-like areas. We have the ability to fish and hunt and eat the food that we harvest. That's why Vermont is in such great shape today, and that's why Vermont is the #1 state to move to if you enjoy the natural environment. So, a couple of items, and I promise I'll wrap this up. Everybody's ready. But I do work at the Agency of Natural Resources, and I work with Secretary Julie Moore, and she is also devoted to the environment and a huge conservationist, but she reminds me regularly that Senator Leahy is the reason that we have the toolkit we need today to make our efforts worthwhile. He leaves a huge and massive impact and imprint on all of the work that he does. And simply put, He has really put us in the position today because of the toolkit he's built, and Gaye and Candace have both talked to that. So just quickly, what is the future? In preparation of tonight, I too, like Gaye, I talked to as many people as I could, professionals in the space of conservation, but I also spoke to friends and colleagues who had other interests that were not necessarily in the environment. And I asked the question, what do you think when I ask you about Senator Leahy's impact on Vermont when it comes to our natural environment? And some people talked about the Forest Legacy Program and the absolute necessity of forest health, working lands, and forest advocacy. Others talked about the absolute need of federal investment in land acquisition. Others talked about the research and development component of all of the work that we do, or limiting the spread of invasive species. Some people talked about the Farm Bill and the absolute importance of that piece of legislation to offer solutions to agriculture. Some people talked about flora and fauna. Actually, a lot of people talked about the newly discovered orchid. If you don't know what that is, find a botanist in the room later and ask about it. People talked about ridding the consumer industry of chemicals that we put in products that end up seeping into our soil and water. And almost everybody told me a story of their favorite fishing spot, hunting location, bike trail, or walking path. They told me stories about their hobbies passed down from generation to generation, like mushroom hunts or maple sugaring, but everybody talked about a sense of belonging. So I only used a couple words, and it solicited quite a conversation for me. That was a whole month of conversation that I thoroughly enjoyed. So a quick note here. The Forest Legacy Program is a really important program to talk to because we had to do so with a requirement for public access. Public access, public engagement, and public solutions. We must center that in our work. To meet that is our future. Doing our best to engage the public in our work is critical, to include everybody in the conversation, and we have a lot more to do. Too many of our neighbors are being excluded in conversation, and we have a moment in time where the public is demanding a different level of participation from government and government partners. So, for example, joining the agency, I was asked to really focus on environmental justice and bring the agency to a better place. Environmental justice is about understanding the benefits some enjoy while others take on a disproportionate burden. Once you understand it, you have a responsibility to change it. And so we must continue to hold true that the work of environmental conservation is an all hands on deck practice. It's all voices in the choir, pick your cliche, but it is a team sport. And so I'm going to just going to make one other comment that I think is really important that I have learned speaking to a lot of communities who define themselves as an environmental justice community. We must include and recognize and appreciate that there is a different sense of belonging depending on your circumstance. So just want to say that one more time. There's a very different sense of belonging of the environment and the natural resources around you depending on your circumstance. And what Senator Leahy has continued to do throughout his career is reach out to people and invite them in. So, I think we are all here because we recognize that our land and our landscape is not ours. We don't own it. We need it more than it needs us. It's our connection to life, and we have a responsibility to the people who come after us. And I'm going to end with this, with your own words, Senator Leahy. In his remarks announcing his retirement, he said something that has really stuck with me. I know my time in the Senate has made a difference for Vermonters and often well beyond. I know I have been there for my state when I was needed most. I know I've taken our best ideas and helped them grow. I brought Vermont's voice to the United States Senate and Vermont values across the world. I would say that is a beautiful summation of who you are and why Vermont has such a special place because of you. So thank you both.
Thanks. Just one more announcement. When we got together, we thought, well, what should we give Senator Leahy to honor his 48 years in the Senate and all he's done for the state? And we really thought, what does he need, most likely? And what we decided was that next spring, all of our groups who came together tonight are going to invite Senator Leahy and Marcel down to Montpelier, where we're going to be planting a tree in his honor on the State House lawn. So we're looking forward to that. So please join me in welcoming again Senator Patrick Leahy.
I wouldn't dare try that. Thank you. There you go. Okay. Now get your stretch in. It's out. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This means a lot. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Well, I really appreciate this. A tree on the State House lawn means so much to me. I grew up almost across the street from the Capitol. As a little boy, I used to, with a couple of my buddies, we'd ride our tricycles up and down the halls of the State House, and I recall racing down a nearly empty State House, went through a door, ran up against what I thought was about a 40-foot high desk, and seeing a voice lean over and say, "Yes." And I said, "Are you the governor?" "Yes." "Now get out." But he gave us some candy on the way out. We thought it was a wonderful adventure. My parents had a different view, and I told I could go there with him. Now when I walk in that same office, Phil Scott said, different desk. So, but Maggie, just to start in reverse order here, what you said, learning from us in the office, we also learned from you. I remember times when my Irish and Italian temper would start to rise, and on something I was about to head to the floor and raise hell, and you would say, "Well, yes, you could do that, or perhaps you could," and you calmed me down. And Gaye, I remember that the time with Ken Salazar, and I thought, it's probably nice to have this kind of seniority when he sat there knowing that I would be helping to write his budget, and wouldn't it be nice if he took a moment to tell me what he'd done in Vermont? And he did. Ken was a wonderful, wonderful secretary, and Marcel and I, the opportunity to travel to different parts of the world with him. And Candy, you remember my campaign. Candy was 5 years old, but with a great memory, and she recalled everybody reminding me that Vermont was the only state in the Union that never elected a Democrat, had never elected since the 17th Amendment, never elected anybody under 50, and never elected a Catholic, and I'm a 34-year-old Democrat, Catholic, running in Vermont. And it's basically, "Oh, yeah, okay, kid, you can have the nomination. It's worthless." And then I realized about my first day there, the most senior member of the Senate, the person who's President Pro Tem, the position I now have, looks at me and says, "Boy, how old are you?" And I said, "Well, I'll be 35 next year, Mr. Chairman." boy, anybody ever tell you you too young to be in the United States Senate? And that's where the Irish Italian temper came in. I said, yes, my opponent for one. He loved it. He loved it. I didn't back down. I didn't want to tell him. I arrested a few people over my time as state's attorney. You don't back down, but it's, I also, Candy, what you said when I talked, be serious for a moment, when I talked to that business group, as a prosecutor, I'd tried a lot of cases. Charlie Tetzlaff, who's here, helped me very, very much on that. And they had praised me, all the people I had put in jail for murder and burglary and everything else. And then they heard the prosecutor tell him, and you know, some of these things the business community does, it's an environmental crime. I had their attention at that point, and off we went. So thank you for remembering that. And Brian, and the Vermont Natural Resources Council, thank you for organizing this event. I can't tell you how much it means both Marcel and myself. My entire time in the U.S. Senate, and for years before that, VNRC has been the leading voice in Vermont for clean air, clean water, conservation, climate. I've looked to you for your leadership, your advice, for the 48 years I've been in the Senate. And now your leadership is needed even more. Because two things. What all of you do here in the environmental movement is seen more and more around this country as this is the gold standard. And what you do is repeated by others. I hear Republicans, Democrats alike in Washington, and so often on some of the hearings we have, they'll turn to me, well, what are they doing in Vermont? And people listen, because what you have done has been so important. So thank you for coming here tonight. You understand how important the health of the earth is, and you remind me of that so often. Vermonters encouraged my work as chair of the Appropriations Committee to keep the federal government funded, but also my support of organic agriculture and dairy, incidentally, the Organic Farm Bill. We had to struggle on that for 2 or 3 years against the opposition of the then chair of agriculture, a man named Jesse Helms, who told me this is a crunchy granola thing. After he left, I became chair. I changed the name to, and adding the word nutrition, but also wanted to put this in. And we passed it. That crunchy granola program is a $60 billion industry now. And you know where I got the idea of it? Marcel and I had a farmer's kitchen, talking to them about all the things they needed to have, the work they were doing to have organic food, how they could make sure some mass-produced thing with all kinds of pesticides, everything else, couldn't be just put on the market and call it organic. They had to have standards. I'm so proud of being able to do that. But I also think of all the things we've been able to do. Social justice, immigration, so on. I received more calls and more mail advocating for the environment than on any other federal issue. And these are not the rubber stamp things, but they're carefully thought out with somebody telling me, here's my views, and that helps so much. I believe that everyone in Vermont wants to protect Lake Champlain. And in fact, to make sure we had the funding for it, slipped it into the funding that goes for Great Lakes. I get when we're having hearings now and so on, and appropriations, I say, it is a great, big, beautiful lake. Everybody goes, yeah. I got some grief from some others around the country, as states with the 5 Great Lakes, and they played that a lot on the national news. And somebody said to Tom Brokaw, do you know that idiot senator who named us a Great Lake? He says, idiot. We've had 4 stories on it showing these beautiful pictures of Lake Champlain. The Chamber of Commerce wants to get copies of our films. He's giving good publicity. But then Lake Memphremagog, Marcel was born on the U.S. side of Lake Memphremagog, her parents having emigrated to Vermont from Canada, and then the Connecticut River. And there, I've been helped by Republican senators and Democratic senators to help protect that. Because I've always argued the environment should not be a political or partisan issue. It is a people issue, a global issue. It is our life and our children's lives and our grandchildren. So that's what we're doing. Thank you. We want to protect Vermont, we got to protect the entire planet. And I've seen that in some of the places I've gone to, brought other senators around the world. Again, both Republicans and Democrats, and say, look at what we're seeing here. Look at this environmental disaster. We can have this exact same thing, and sometimes have had, in our country. Work together. Don't put a partisan label on it. Put it as really saving the earth. We can be proud of the hundreds of thousands of acres of land protected and stewarded across Vermont and in our national forests, our national wildlife refuges, our town forests, and on private land. And Born in Vermont programs I've taken to Washington, like the Forest Legacy Act and the Community Forest Act, they have conserved around this country millions of acres of land that wouldn't have been conserved otherwise. And the idea came from all of you here in Vermont. And I consider myself very fortunate to be able to bring those ideas to the rest of the country. We're getting there. And we watch what's happening with climate change. Look at the flooding, you have flooding, and then you have times of severe drought almost in the same place. This is unprecedented. And our planet, what we see, the environmental challenges are greater than ever. Ecosystem damage is accelerating every year. Climate change, species loss, air, land, and water pollution. You know these dangers. Now, Marcel and I can look at what has happened. I'm proud that I was able to join with so many of you, and we worked together to get legislation to help. I worry about our children and our grandchildren. I want to know what they are going to see, whether they're in Vermont and be fortunate enough to be in Vermont or anywhere else in the country or anywhere else in the world, where they see. John Tracy and I, as we drive around this state over the years, we've seen changes here, some very good, some not so good. And we've seen it around the world. In a couple of weeks, I'm going back to Vietnam, where I used the War Victims Fund, beginning with the first President Bush. And we work together in a bipartisan way. I bring Republicans and Democrats with me when I go to try to heal the wounds of Vietnam. And thank you. I remember the first time I went there, and I was mentioning to somebody else earlier. They're introducing me, and here's several people who have lost their legs to landmines, in all likelihood, American landmines. And they're going on in Vietnamese, and they say every so often, Patrick Leahy, Patrick Leahy. So I'm standing there over 6 feet tall, and one small man, no legs, neatly dressed, just watching me throughout all this. I thought, God, he must hate me, the size of this American, walking on both legs. And they said, would you pick him up and put him in the wheelchair? Now, Marcel is a medical surgical nurse, and she's whispering how to pick him up because he looks so frail, she didn't want to break bones. I did all the time. He's staring at me. I started to get up and put him in there. He grabbed my shirt. He pulled me down. He kissed me. Now, this was decades ago. I still get emotional thinking of it. John Glenn was one of the senators there. John, one of the most wonderful people I've ever known, but not an emotional person. The same thing happened to him. As the tears came down his face, he said to the rest of us on the trip, anybody complains about anything on this trip, I'm throwing you out of here. But we've seen the changes. We've seen the changes. John Tracy fought on the American side in Vietnam. And he's back there on a trip with me in Da Nang, where we're cleaning up the Agent Orange. And the top military person is on the stand with me. I told him about what John had done, and he asked me to point him out. I did. He stood up. All the Vietnamese officials stood up when he did. He walked down, walked up to John, and saluted him. Those are the changes. And as a result of that trip, John, you recall, they asked, could we go do the same thing in Benoit? And that's brought us together. But then we see the changes where a school there started by the Americans. A young woman, second year in college, like all the other students, never started to learn English until she was probably 10 years old, 12 years old, started to learn it. I asked her a question, and she said, well, when you stop to think of it, that would be indicative of it. I'm like, okay, I guess it's working. So Marcel and I are back here happily in January for good. We'll see our farmhouse, our woodlot, our farm fields, and we'll lend our voices to yours. We'll call for the Vermont example to be followed throughout the country. I will be here to help you in any way I can to keep the wonderful leadership you had. And it is a great lake. Thank you. Thank you.